Our world is one world. What touches one affects us all. The seas that wash us round about, the clouds that cover us, the rains that fall. Our world is one world. The thoughts we think affect us all. The way we build our attitudes, with love or hate we make a bridge or wall.
All right, am I sufficiently unmuted? Thank you, Whitaker Locke. That was our accompanist with a very appropriate hymn for the beginning of the year 2021. Our world is one world, from Singing the Living Tradition. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Columbus, Georgia. I'm Bill Harlan, your volunteer service leader. We are an inclusive spiritual community. We don't share a creed, but we do share a commitment to support each other in our many varied, unique, and responsible searches for truth and meaning. And that's what we're going to do this morning. In particular, this morning's service, the theme for this morning is inspiring each other to make 2021 a better year than 2020. We came up with this idea, I have to say, inspired by Michelle Majette, and I loved it. But thinking to myself, I thought, well, that kind of sets a low bar in terms of New Year's resolutions, because it can't be too hard to, make 2021 better than 2020. Could it? Turns out, it didn't take long to answer that question. Where there's a will, there's a way. So we're starting 2021 with even more pandemic and some political chaos going on, but we're also starting with some of our own members of this fellowship getting vaccinated. So good news and bad news. So this morning, our members and friends, a few of them who volunteered, will share short readings. These are passages from favorite books or poems or other sources, and they will describe how these short readings are related to our 7 principles of UU, and how they will use these readings to focus on their intentions, their New Year's resolutions, if you will, for the coming year. We always start our services by lighting the chalice, but before we do that, I'd like to turn it over to David Rush, our technology guru, who will give us some Zoom reminders and Zoom tips. So, David?
Thanks, Bill. As always, we are recording this for upload to YouTube later for those that are not able to join us. So if you don't want your face showing up on our YouTube recording, you can click on your stop video. But of course, we like seeing your faces, so if you're okay with that, please keep it there. And you can join us and subscribe to our YouTube channel. After the service, we will having our a chat session after the closing hymn, and we hope people will stick around for that. And that is not recorded to honor everyone's privacy in that discussion. Back to you, Bill.
Thanks, David. So as I mentioned, we start our services by lighting the chalice, and during these Zoom times, we use a special on-the-go Sierra Club portable chalice. The chalice symbolizes for us reason, tolerance and freedom, and also respect, compassion, and love. I do have some announcements. Next week, we're going to have another kind of different and pretty special service. Patricia Lassiter our member and friend, will talk about her work during this COVID-19 year. And I think we all know that Patricia is a dedicated political and human rights activist. She's been putting in 12 hours a day for the past year doing outreach to people who have felt excluded from the democratic process, which of course is an important principle of Unitarian Universalism. And her talk next Sunday on the eve of Martin Luther King Jr. Day will be about what it's been like to go out into Georgia communities that have felt underrepresented during this political process. And she'll talk about the power of not just going out and kind of trying to inspire people to vote this way or that, but she's discovered the power of going out and just listening to people. So next week, Patricia Lassiter will join us. And then the week after that, on January 24th, will be our lay leader, Rick Spradlin, who always has a message that's right on target for one of our 7 principles. And then the week after that, on January 31st, Danielle Neal, who has moved to Pennsylvania, but who is remaining a very active member of our fellowship. We're delighted about that. She's going to talk about Groundhog Day, and she's going to do it from Gobbler's Knob in Puxatawney, Pennsylvania, near where she lives. So that'll be a great service to end out January. And then I would remind you that you can join our Wednesday night discussion groups by Zoom and our Friday lunch group by Zoom. And you can also, if you miss a service or you want to review something that we did in a previous service, you can go to our YouTube channel. And we've just posted on our homepage an updated article about how to Zoom and how to YouTube with our fellowship. So there should be complete instructions so that make it a lot easier to sign in. I also remind everyone that we're still collecting warm coats and jackets for Paz Amigos, which helps immigrants released from the detention center down by Lumpkin. We're collecting blankets, underwear, and some other items, tarps, I think, for the homeless, and they go to the Homeless Resource Network. You can actually stop by the fellowship, and there's 2 boxes for the Homeless Resource Network there. If you want to contribute to Paz Amigos, send us an email, uufcga@gmail.com, and put Paz Amigos donation information or something like that. And Judy Barnett will get a hold of you about how to get those to her. And of course, during the holiday season, we've been focusing on feeding the Valley Food Bank. And are we going to continue doing that this month? I'll ask, maybe we can unmute Susan or Brenda. I'm throwing a little bit of a wrench into the works here. Okay, we don't have that information, but I think it's still feeding the Valley. So let's move on. The 7 principles are really important to refresh the 7 principles for this presentation, so let's do that now. The 7 principles sum up the core values of Unitarian Universalism, and I don't think there's ever been a time in our recent history when these values are more important. First and foremost, the first one is the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Number 2, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. Number 3, acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. We're going to do that today. Number 4, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. 5, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. And boy, when has this been more important? Number 6, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. And finally, number 7, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. Now let's move on to our next section of our service, which is joys and concerns. One of the ways we proclaim the vitality of our fellowship is through sharing brief and personal joys and concerns. And David, if we can allow Brenda Stevens to give us an update. I think we're all aware that our member and great friend Larry Summerhour had a stroke. He's recovering. Brenda has an update for us, which is a joy, thankfully.
Yes, it is a joy. I received an email from Larry's son, John, on Friday. He says Dad has finally been moved to a rehab facility in Valley, Alabama. He greatly appreciates the cards that he's received from you all. His cell is still the best way to reach him directly. It's unclear how long he'll be there or what his long-term recovery looks like, but we're hoping for the best. And he sends an updated a mailing address for cards, which I will send out today to the members and friends so they can send him cards. I'll send that in an email today. Okay.
Great, thank you, Brenda. Appreciate it. Now we're going to switch to our gallery view, our Brady Bunch view, to look at and allow anybody else to join in with a joy or concern. So you'll have to unmute yourself. And Elise, do we have to give everybody permission to unmute before they can do that?
I'm working on that now.
All right.
While she's doing that, I do have one.
Great.
Well, two actually. Both of my grandmothers are currently sick. One of them positive with COVID, and the other with pneumonia in the hospital as of last night. So if you could keep them in your thoughts and or prayers.
Thanks, Whitaker. Anybody else with a joy or concern? All right. Seeing none.
We do have one.
Okay.
We do have one from John Mallory Land. Please light a candle for everyone injured and the families of those killed in the recent unrest at the Capitol.
I will do that. Now it's time for our Celebration of Life toast, which is a unique tradition to our fellowship. We do it a little differently on Zoom. You can join in with your cup of coffee or other beverage of your choice. And remember, as always, our toast carries no doctrinal significance. It's not a sacrament. It's just a warm tradition, and we invite you all to share it with us. I'll read the toast, and we can all join in the last line, which we all know by heart by now. We celebrate life with its beauty and its pain. We lift these cups in tribute to the achievements of human minds and hands, and in sensitivity to the frustrations of misfortune and heartache. Not fixing blame or credit for the outcome of chance, sensing the risk, savoring the joy, sharing it all, knowing of the certainty of death, and remembering the value of each moment. We drink our toast of celebration to this time, to the future, to each other, to the throbbing of the earth and sea and sky with life. Together, we drink this toast in celebration of life. This morning's offering will now be given and received in the spirit of grateful fellowship. And if our technology is going right, Elise will put the information about how you can do that in our chat, and David will put a slide up that gives you our mailing address. I would I want to let everybody know that our PayPal account is down. It's just that we switched some bank accounts around and PayPal's been hard to deal with. So you can mail your contributions to P.O. Box 698, Fortson, Georgia 31808. And I want to emphasize how important your contributions are. And we are supported by each other, including some extremely generous donors, who don't want to be named, but all of us, big or small, every donation is really helps. We're keeping our property going with our with people getting ready to be vaccinated. I know some of us have already got appointments to receive vaccines. We're hoping to meet in person again soon. And when we do, our fellowship and our property and our Grace Fellowship Hall will be in even better condition than when we left. And that's due to your donation. So thank you very much. And so while you're looking for an envelope and a stamp and writing out your check, Whitaker has chosen some offertory music, which is really interesting. And I'd call it a double-edged sword, but I'm even hesitant to use the word sword this week. It's Chopin's Revolutionary Etude. And so some of us think that after the general election and after the Senate runoff election, that was a little bit of a revolution. And little did we know we'd have an attempted revolution a few days later. So thank you, Whitaker, for preparing a very appropriate piece. Whitaker Locke with some Chopin. Wow. Whitaker, that's a very ambitious piece to play on a Sunday morning. It's perfect for the times we live in, And it's really inspiring. Thank you so much. And then I noticed in the chat that Susan Stevenson from our Social Action Committee has said, yes, Feeding the Valley this month. Feeding the Valley, they are swamped with requests. So you can send when you send a check-in at any time during the month, you can include a little bit, just make a note of it. And Ron Usry, our treasurer, will divide up your donation and send the appropriate amount to Feeding the Valley. So thank you again. So now, our talk, which is a bit of an experiment. Again, just to refresh, a short reading, a description of how that reading applies to one or all or any of our 7 principles, and a short description of how that's going to inspire us moving forward this year. So we're going to start out with the person who actually had the idea for this service, and that's Michelle Majette. So David, if you can make Michelle, there they are. Okay, your picture looks great this morning, Michelle.
It's new technology. Hey, my New Year's resolution was inspired by the words of Ralph Waldo Emerson, who was a transcendentalist, philosopher, poet, and also part of the early Unitarian movement in America. And these are the words that so inspired me. I have to pass through this world but once. Any good, therefore, that I can do, or any kindness that I can show for any fellow creature, let me do it now. Let me not defer or neglect it, for I shall not pass this way again. I think those words relate very closely to our second UU principle, which is to encourage justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. So for my 2021 resolution, considering that quote and our UU principle, I plan to devote more of my time, energy, and resources into spreading kindness and compassion to all those in need. And as we all know, there are plenty of people in need now. So that's my resolution.
Thank you, Michelle. That was perfect. Now, we'll introduce Kenny Gray, who's a friend of the fellowship and who just, everybody who's talking this morning has contributed a lot. And boy, if you know how much Kenny had contributed behind the scenes to all our production, we all owe him a debt of thanks. So, Kenny, your reading this morning.
Okay, thanks. Hello, everybody. For me, I'm inspired by all of the UU principles, but the one that informs all the others for me is the 7th principle, which is respect for the interdependent web of all existence, of which we are a part. For me, this principle is where science and spirituality meet. And so my reading this morning is a poem. One of my joys in life is reading, studying, and writing poetry. Brenda knows this, and she heard an interview with Barbara Kingsolver on NPR earlier in the fall, and then ended up ordering a book of poetry by Barbara Kingsolver. And I found a poem in there that really inspired me. It does what the best poetry does for me. It's a simple poem, but the meaning, the impact of the poem goes far beyond the simple words of the poem. I'm going to try to do it justice. I'm going to have to look off screen to read it. The title of the poem is How to Fly in 10,000 Easy Lessons by Barbara Kingsolver. Behold your body as water and mineral worth, the self same water that soon, from a tree's way of thinking soon, will be lifted through the elevator hearts of a forest, returned to the sun in a leaf-eyed gaze. And the rest, all wordless leavings, the perfect bone white ash of you, light as snowflakes, falling on updrafts toward the unbodied breath of a bird. Behold your elements reassembled as pieces of sky, ascending without regret, for you've been lucky enough, fallen for the last time into a slump, the wrong crowd, love. You've made the best deal. You summited the mountain, or you didn't. Anything left undone, you can slip like a cloth bag of marbles into the hands of a child who will be none the wiser. Imagine your joy on rising. Repeat as necessary. What I love about this poem, beyond the language, the rhythm, the sound of it, is how she creates images um, and uses metaphors like elevator hearts of a forest, the bone white ash of you, light as snowflakes falling on updrafts toward the unbodied breath of a bird. The second stanza is about regret. If any of you are anything like me, you're looking at the years you have left on this earth and you're thinking about things you haven't done. And to me, the second stanza is inviting you to release all of those obligations you might feel, or at least some of them, or at the very least to let go of any regrets you might have about things you didn't do, didn't have time to do, or weren't able to do. And a real touching metaphor of a bag of marbles handed off to a child. A lot of power in this poem that I wouldn't have had a chance to read without a Christmas gift from Brenda. So Happy New Year to all of you.
Thank you, Kitty. That's great. Barbara Kingsolver is absolutely one of my favorite writers. Next up is Joni Endress. Joni, by the way, is her huge contributions to the fellowship have been classes in meditation and mindfulness and Buddhism. And I've gotten, I have about three or four different books that I keep by my bedside or keep by my desk that I refer to constantly, and most of them have come from Joni, either by recommendation or by gift. So welcome, Joni, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you. And Kenny, that was beautiful. And Kingsolver, she also is one of my favorite, really one of my favorites. And Bill, you took away my beginning because I want to, this is how I started my, I also chose the seventh principle, the respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. And I want to say, as most of you know, that for the last 3.5 years before the pandemic, I had the enormous joy of leading discussions on Buddhism, meditation, mindfulness, and discussions on the Book of Joy. So March 2020, last class, the pandemic, and I, like so many of us, found myself floundering and lost with a sense of ungroundedness. In this part of the year, I have marveled at all of you folks who have carried the torch for all of us, all of the folks who provided us with a weekly service, our techies, the Zoom experts, and the folks who kept our inner and outer community outreach going. And all of you who stayed tuned and kept our fellowship web of interdependence alive. So I have selected two passages from the Book of Joy. For those of you who are not familiar with the cover, the first is a quote by the Archbishop, Archbishop Desmond Tutu. What the Dalai Lama and I are offering is a way of handling your worries, thinking about others. You can think about others who are in a similar situation, or perhaps even in a worse situation, but who have survived and even thrived. It does not help quite a lot to see yourself as part of a, I did it again. It does help to see yourself as part of a greater whole. Once again, the path of joy was connection, and the path of sorrow was separation. When we see others as separate, they become a threat. When we see others as a part of us, as connected, as interdependent, then there is no challenge we cannot face together. And then my second quote is by the Dalai Lama when he was asked what it was like to wake up with joy and his experience of each morning. And the Dalai Lama said this: I think if you are an intensely religious believer, as soon as you wake up, you thank God for another day and you try to do God's will. For a non-theist like myself, but who is a Buddhist, as soon as I wake up, I remember Buddha's teaching, the importance of kindness and compassion, wishing something good for others, or at least to reduce their suffering. Then I remember that everything is interrelated, the teaching of interdependence. So then I set my intention for the day, that this day should be meaningful. Meaningful means, if possible, serve and help others. If not possible, then at least not to harm others. That's a meaningful day. So my intention for the coming year is to follow the words of the Dalai Lama, to set my intention each day that this day should be meaningful. If possible, to serve and help others. And if that's not possible, then at least to do not to harm anyone. And I want to just read one more quote, and this is Mahatma Gandhi. Interdependence is and ought to be as much the ideal of man as self-sufficiency. Man is a social being. Without interrelation with society, he cannot realize his oneness with the universe or suppress his egotism. His social independence enables him to test his faith and to prove himself on the touchstone of reality. Thank you, and Happy New Year, everybody.
Muted, Bill.
Thank you. Joni, that was wonderful. Thank you. Happy New Year to you too. Our next reading comes from Connie Ussery, who is another one of those frequent contributors to UU in many, many ways. Connie, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. And I've been thinking about the fourth principle for a long time, free and responsible search for truth and meaning, free and responsible search. It reminded, there's so many quotes you could relate to this, but I found Terry Pratchett, who was one of my favorite writers, he writes some humorous science fiction. He said, if you don't turn your life into a story, you just become part of someone else's story. Your life is your own story. And Bill Harley also has a quote about that. He's one of my favorite storytellers. Terry Pratchett is a profound atheist writer. He talks about, all of his books are about, how mythology is sort of, is that story that he likes to make up about how things are and what comes afterwards. Bill Harley has a different story about that. And he's a profound writer as well and storyteller. And he says, the real challenge, the real path is finding your own voice, the kind of stories you choose to tell and the way you choose to tell them. And he says, you have to own your story. You have to decide what kinds of stories you want to make of yourself. And that becomes the essence of your life. And so that's the fourth principle to me.
Thanks, Connie. Bill Harley, huh? Interesting. Next up is our Pennsylvania delegation, Danielle Neal, who will be presenting on January 31st, but Danielle has a reading for us. Danielle, how are things in the snowy north? I think you're still muted, Danielle.
Oh, there I am. It's so cold up here and the sun is never out. So I am sitting in the sun right now. I'm sorry if it's very bright, but I am enjoying it while it lasts because it won't. I would like to read a poem by Shel Silverstein, who is musician, singer, songwriter, poet, and just artist as well. If none of you have ever, I don't even know if you can see this, A Light in the Attic, because he does a lot of children's poems, and I love reading this to my kids, and I've really enjoyed him as a child myself. But sometimes I feel like simply put is one of the best ways to go. So the poem is How Many, How Much? How many slams in an old screen door depends how loud you shut it. How many slices in a bread depends how thin you cut it. How much good inside a day depends how good you live 'em. How much love inside a friend depends how much you give 'em. And I think this really applies to all of the 7 principles because, you know, we can repeat the 7 principles every Sunday, every day, but they don't mean anything until you put something into them. And really, this is a great poem for, you know, me moving up here, but also for the rest of the year. You know, last year was very hard, but we do not have to be a victim to the year. We can put you know, ourselves into every day that we live and make the most of it. So thank you. I hope you found that inspiring. I know it's very simplistic, but sometimes simplistic is what we need.
Well, like a lot of things that are simple, there's a lot of depth to it. So thank you so much, and Shel Silverstein is great. John Nix, a longtime member of the fellowship, our historian and the keeper of the book of the UUFC, the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Columbus, Georgia, and one of our tennis gurus and a saxophonist and member of the UU Singers. John, what's the reading you chose for us today?
I'm reading a poem by Robert Frost titled The Road Not Taken. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Long I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then I took the other as just as fair and having perhaps a better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though as for that, the passing there had worn them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that's made all the difference. Well, this poem is about someone who comes to a fork in the road and he has to make a choice between two paths. One path is about the same as the other, but when you make a commitment to one path, you've made it far more valuable than the other. And perhaps the value of a New Year's resolution is in that idea. It's a commitment, and therefore it instantly becomes more valuable than any number of vague wishes that you might have. I relate all of this to the fourth UU principle, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. What New Year's resolution can I make related to this principle? Well, as a retiree, I have the opportunity to choose between many paths, not just two, I suppose. I've long had an interest in philosophy, but acknowledge I've not given it enough attention until now. And so my commitment or my resolution for the new year is as follows. I commit to reading and studying philosophy until I understand the key ideas of the world's greatest philosophers. I won't be concerned about the road not taken. I will instead concentrate on the path to which I'm committed.
Thank you, John. And of course, by choosing that commitment, you realize that you've subliminally signed up for doing presentations to UU on Sunday from time to time. Maybe not what you intended. Thank you, John. And I love that poem. Next up is Ron Ussery, our esteemed treasurer and one of the MacGyvers of our fellowship. Ron Ussery.
Thanks, Bill. I chose a quote from Vincent van Gogh, a quote that I first ran across about a week ago at a Vincent van Gogh museum exhibit. Van Gogh, as you probably know, was a very troubled artist who killed himself apparently at age 37, having sold only one or two paintings his entire life. He felt very much rejected by the world and had a troubled life. Of course, we know now what great talent he had and appreciate his talent very much, but he was not appreciated during his lifetime. The quote reads, "A great fire burns within me, but no one stops to warm themselves at it, and passersby only see a wisp of smoke." This brings to my mind the bookends of the first and seventh UU principle about the worth and dignity of every individual, as well as that interconnectedness that's so vital. And clearly, Van Gogh felt unconnected to the rest of the world. And as far as a resolution is concerned, it reminds me of my first career choice when I was a journalist for several years. And I was spent a long stint as a features writer. And I learned in features that every individual I ever ran across had a story within them. Some are just more eager to bring that story to the front to let you know about it than others. So I resolved to return to that spirit of a features writer looking for the next story and to listen more, particularly to people who might not have an audience, like Van Gogh felt he was in that category. To people who don't have an audience, who aren't accepted, who might really appreciate my warming my hands by their fire, whatever that passion is.
Boy, thanks, Ron. And that really kind of will lead into Patricia Lassiter's talk next week about listening to people. And as another retired journalist, boy, I can say that's true. Everybody has a story, and a lot of times we don't know them because we're not paying close attention. So now, last but certainly not least, our esteemed president, kind of shanghaied into that role, but been doing, what a job he's been doing. Take Hal back at the beginning of 2020, and it's been amazing. And so I wanted, I particularly leaned on Hal to have a reading for us. Hal, what did you do?
My quote is, "I love you when you bow in your mosque, kneel in your temple, pray in your church, for you and I are sons of one religion, and it is the Spirit." This is a quote from The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. In my youth, I read The Prophet and other works by Khalil Gibran, and they were instrumental in the formation of my religious views. This change strengthened my acceptance and tolerance of all people. The quote reflects our third principle of accepting one another and encouragement of spiritual growth. And my resolution is to practice and promote unity and tolerance during these divisive times. That's it.
Great, thank you, Helen. Yeah, that's another one. It's a short and compact thought, but one that speaks volumes. And boy, that's something we can all think about, as we, in this year, we're all going to be confronted with people that we have strong disagreements with. I would remind everybody that to stay tuned. Whitaker's going to play one more time, but then afterwards we will stop the recording and we'll have a Q&A. And if somebody else has something else they wanted to share and didn't get a chance to do that, please do that. And we'll also have a Zoom social hour. So now it's time to extinguish the chalice here, that it might glow gently in our hearts. May it light your path as you leave this place. And for our closing words, you can rise in body or spirit for the closing words. I think most of us know them. With unity of spirit, we go our ways in universal fellowship until we meet again. And now Whitaker will play us home, and he is going to play and sing hymn 302 in Singing the Living Tradition, Children of the Human Race, another extremely appropriate hymn for today. Whitaker, please.
Children of the human race, offspring of our Mother Earth, not alone in endless space, has our planet given birth. Far across the cosmic skies, countless suns in glory blaze, and from untold planets rise endless canticles of praise. Should some sign of others reach this our lonely planet Earth, differences of form and speech must not hide our common worth. When at last our minds are free and the clouds of fear disperse, then at last we'll learn to be children of the